Christian Parenting.
Hey guys, Daniel Crawford here, nearing the end of the year, to which most of us will happily say good riddance to 2020, but truly, I'd venture to say that anyone listening has walked through some really hard things with our families in this unprecedented year of COVID and school closures and economic uncertainty, more screen time than ever, higher rates of all the things you don't want to see, lower rates of all the things you do. The list goes on. We'll say that it has been a privilege and honestly has felt pretty poetic to launch the Life Upside Down podcast in a year where most everyone can relate to that sentiment in one way or another. And so before we start this episode, I wanted to take just a moment to brag on the group that has made these conversations possible. ChristianParenting.org is an online resource that offers practical help and biblical encouragement to people and parents just like you. And so they published the workbook that we wrote together called A Parent's Guide to Sorrow and Suffering that's on the website. And they are behind the production of this podcast, along with many others in the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. And so here's the deal. Christian Parenting is 100% donor-funded and relies on listeners like you to support the future creation of resources like this. And so if you've been enjoying these early episodes, would you please consider making a donation to Christian Parenting today? To make this easy, you can just go to www.cpgive.org. That's cpgive.org. And if you make a donation today, your gift will actually be doubled thanks to a generous donor that has stepped forward with a $10,000 matching grant. And so you give 20, but Christian Parenting actually receives 40, and so on and so forth. And that's going to impact more parents in 2021 and beyond. So all parents need a trusted community. All parents need a reminder that it's okay to be imperfect. All parents need Jesus. And as parents come to know and love Jesus more, so do their kids. And it's a beautiful thing. So please consider giving today, www.cpgive.org. And thanks so much for your generosity.
Where do you turn when life turns upside down?
Is there hope for the hurting? Can we find joy in the sorrow?
This is the Life Upside Down podcast with Abel Speaks, and we're your hosts, Daniel and Kelly Crawford.
Let's jump into today's episode. Alrighty, welcome back, friends, for episode 11 of Life Upside Down, where we will hit resume with Matthew Lyle Mooney. And so if you missed episode 10, that would be a colossal mistake to not catch the backstory and just the truth bombs that Matt was dropping in the first half of this conversation, the challenging perspective that he'll bless us with here over the next half hour will be all the more powerful if you have that foundation. And so with that disclaimer, let's jump back in with our brother Matt Mooney of 99 Balloons.
Can you tell us a little bit about so you guys started 99 Balloons, and then at some point you guys made a decision to adopt your oldest daughter, Lena. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and what that stretch and season looked like and how you guys processed and navigated that decision and just kind of what life looks like now with her?
Yeah, well, I'll say we're still navigating that decision. Lena she's awesome. So she's 13 now. We adopted Lena when she was 5. And Lena has a story. We could do a podcast on Lena's story all her own. She was 5 years old in an orphanage in eastern Ukraine. We knew, there was no surprise. We knew that Lena had profound disabilities. She was nonverbal and immobile when we adopted her. We did not have a diagnosis because Ukraine didn't have the means to give her a diagnosis where she was. And she was in a to be honest, just a terrible, horrible reality. She was malnourished. She was in a room in this orphanage because of her disability. And these are the places where 99 Balloons goes and does our global work. Just the unbelievable stories of what disability looks like globally. Lena is just a reminder to us of that. And so we're always untangling, what is Lena's autism, cerebral palsy, and what is Lena's due to her environment, right? Of if our children, if any of our children lived from 0 to 5 in the reality that she did, they would have some serious things going on. And so she has ramifications of that, of her environment in her life. And then she also has significant disability going on. And so when we adopted Lena and we brought her home, our other kids were 2 and 3. So we had 2, 3, and 5. And let's just leave it at it was a little bit wild. And so, the reality of we would go to a restaurant when Lena would have an absolute grade A nuclear meltdown in the restaurant, everybody would look at us and we'd be looking at them like, hey, you've got as good a guess on this. This is the first time we've seen this also. We're experiencing this all together the first time. So, Lena is just an absolute force. She's a beautiful girl. We're always figuring out how we navigate her life, how we ensure that she has relationships in her community and is known. And that's very important to us, and it's very difficult. She likes routine. She likes sameness, and so getting her out and about into new experiences is always interesting. But that's a little bit of Lena. And early on, I received this question, coming out of Elliot and losing him, then having two typically developing beautiful, wonderful children, Hazel and Anders. Somebody, most people know me, I kind of tend to have my opinions out in front of me. So most people wouldn't ask this probably of me, but we got asked by someone, and I actually really appreciated the honesty of the question. After so much hard, why did you choose hard? And I really get that. I really understand that question. We chose hard, right? In the eyes a little bit of the world when we adopted Lena into our family. Certainly for her siblings, it's aspects of it that are hard. And to us, it just goes back to that 2-bucket example where we think that life is lived not in avoidance of things that we perceive as pain, suffering, or difficult, but in the nearness of Jesus within all of that. And, we are not the heroes in the Lena story. She is the hero of the Lena story. We are the recipients of her life, and we are the recipients every day of it's hard and it's beautiful. She is the reminder of that reality to us all the time.
One kind of just practical question in there too, and then I'm going to double click on what you had said earlier about after already walking through a difficult season, it seems like you willfully chose, more difficult. I'm going to stick a pin in that, but even just thinking about Lena and loving her and leading her, shepherding her, parenting her, caring for her. One tangible question, how do you specifically pray for Lena? What is your prayer for her? And then another question, and I hope this isn't a strange question, but as we think about shepherding and discipling, our kids in our flock, what does prayer look like for Lena? Or what does discipleship and spiritual formation and worship look like, as you had said, for a sweet girl like Lena?
Those are both fantastic questions, and I really appreciate them. So first and foremost, we pray for Lena. We now have a story podcast. You guys know of it. We talked about it just briefly, called Atypical Podcast, and you can find it at The Atypical Life. The reason that I bring it up is not to give me a plug, though. I look for that every chance I get. We just did 2 episodes on what our prayer for Lena really is not. And what I mean by that is our prayer for Lena is not that she would be healed of autism. Our prayer for Lena is because we believe that she was beautifully and wonderfully made, and autism actually is a part of who she is. Again, we could spend an hour or two on that, but we pray for Lena, prayer from scripture that God would restore what the locust had eaten in her life. So it's not autism that has taken things really from Lena. It's the world's reaction to her and the world's treatment and uh, of her that has taken things from her. And so we ask that God in our prayers for her would restore her to who he made her to be. If that's with autism, with cerebral palsy, with whatever it is, that we want her to be free, to be who she was made to be, not that things would have been robbed or taken from her. So we ask, our prayers for Lena is that she would be who God made her to be, and that she would be loved and in community for her whole life, which segues into the second part of what does it look like for Lena to be in a congregation, to be discipled, to be prayed for. And that really is a huge, like, that is kind of the emphasis of my life. And it boils down to me to one word that I put before the church constantly, which is the word relationships. The church's role with our friends experiencing disability is to build relationships with them. We don't need experts. We don't need academics in the church. Great. If we got them, good. Put them to use. What we need is people who love and follow Jesus to actively be uncomfortable when their friends with disability aren't present. And they need to ask, why are they not present? Is your community group, your Sunday school class, your little group that's eating after dinner, your kids' classroom at church? Does your pulpit have a ramp? Like, Jesus's picture of the body of Christ includes people with disability. And when we mute those voices in our church and we mute those gifts, we are the ones that suffer. It's so often work with disability is kind of it's pushed through the charity hole, right? Like, oh, we really ought to do some good and we really need to help. And like, that is not where I'm coming from.
I
We
could go on a
suffer.
soapbox about that. Oh my gosh, it drives me crazy. But continue, yes.
Feel free, by all means. I'd love to hear it, and I'll amen it. I'll amen it all the way through. But you would be lucky to spend time with my daughter. You'd be lucky to spend time with the kiddos that we get to work with the adults with disability. They change you. They have gifts. I call it the mutuality of ministry. We are not showing up on white horses at 99 balloons to serve our poor friends with disability. We are simply championing and advocating their presence in our churches and everything to do with our churches. And if things at the church don't work for our friends with disability, then change them. And that means you got to become comfortable being uncomfortable. Worship shouldn't be like, if your church worship is like superly fine-tuned, you got the haze machine and everybody's quiet when it's time to be quiet and everybody sits when it's time to sit, then I'm just telling you, my friends with disability don't want anything to do with that. And that's your fault, not theirs. And we got to be able to undo things within the church so that we don't put a polished service and our own comfort above the reality of welcoming our friends in our communities with disability into the church. They're supposed to be there. Scripture is very clear over and over and over again that God shows his strength through weakness, right? And we all the time, we want to just like the best musicians, the best speakers. Like, God is not impressed with that stuff. He wants the body of his believers to be full of what the world sees as weak.
That's so good. I often say, whether we're talking about someone with a disability or someone that is living below the poverty line or, fill in the blank different than us, I think oftentimes we use the language of like, oh, we're going to help them or we're going to serve them. And it's like, no, we're just sharing our life with them. That's the ask, right? Is just share our life with one another, build relationships as you're talking about. Because I think when we use that language of help, it elevates like they need us, right? And so then it changes our heart and mind in how we engage with that person. And so I think it's a disservice across the board. And so I love what you said of just, yeah, we're just here to, welcome them, invite, and share our lives with each other, and worship the Lord together. So so good.
I think as well as you were talking about just the church at large and God's vision for the church, and I think thinking in terms of diversity and what that word evokes in a contemporary context is often we're thinking about racial diversity. We're thinking about every, tribe, nation, and tongue and coming together to worship Jesus, which is a beautiful vision that will come to fruition. And so rightfully so, I think being intentional and thoughtful about racial, ethnic diversity in our church bodies, in the local expressions of the body of Christ is ought to be there and be an ongoing conversation where so many of us can excel still more. I'm confident. And so I think as you were sharing, man, I was thinking about the diversity when it comes to, quote unquote, ability and disability, and typical and atypical, and neat and buttoned up. And like you said, predictable. This thing runs like clockwork versus kind of messy, and there's going to be disruptions, and we're gonna roll with it. And how it would just be a great for anybody listening, kind of a heart check of, man, if I am a follower of Jesus, if I am plugged into a local body, which I hope you are, if you're a follower of Jesus, then does any of the things that Matt was just sharing, does that sound like my church or not? And so, man, thank you and
Yeah.
clearly that's another thing that just flows out of you as just a passion point that is, I think, so helpful in the thing that maybe we don't actively suppress or ignore, but is just oh man, maybe I've not really ever even thought about that, which in and of itself is an issue and a problem that I love that you are, taking effort to shine a light upon. I was going to segue. Any other final thoughts there as we're responding though?
Yeah, I mean, if anything catches your attention on the disability, I really do encourage you to look at 99balloons.org, to look at theatypicallife.com. So often the church's starting point with our friends with disability is, unfortunately, this might be a Southern thing. It's a little bit fixed on praying for them to be healed, and so we kind of tackle that. And I really do think it's a good jarring thing to think on of what does Jesus want our local expression of our body to look like.
It's good, man. And that's not because you alluded to it earlier, but because I had every intention of doing it because I just listened to it. The Atypical podcast. I mean, whatever. People are going to come on if they have podcasts. We're going to tell you about their podcast, and that's something we're going to do. And every time we do it, it's going to be like, of course, we think this person has wonderful things to say, and so you should go hear more wonderful things they have to say. But for anybody listening, if y'all lived in the serial podcast era where that thing just went viral, I mean, it reminds me of that in the best of ways. Just it's not just this. We hit record on this conversation, which is kind of what's happening now. It is, bro, the level of creativity, thought, time, intentionality. It is like enjoying a TV program with your ears. Like it is just so intelligently and compellingly crafted that genuinely like push pause now if you need to miss the last 5 minutes of this conversation so that you don't forget. Go search atypical, one word, atypical, and you're going to find this thing that Matt has just created, and you are going to be blessed by it. And whether your heart's been pounding over the last 10 minutes on these topics, then for sure go check it out. But even if not, man, as call it an act of God leading you to listen to this episode, is him saying, no, I really think you should maybe think about this if you've never thought about it before. And man, I can't think of a better place to point people than that resource that you are creating. So theatypicallife.com or atypical on any podcast providing platform that you use. Please, please, please go check that out. Man, last question. And so it kind of ties back to some of what we've discussed earlier. And it ties to some of what we do week in, week out, Matt, is as we're often getting connected with families that are pregnant and have received, usually through genetic testing or an irregular ultrasound, they're getting these diagnoses, these life limiting diagnoses in utero, and the implications, you laid that out beautifully earlier in our conversation. Hey, it's you're probably looking at limited time in terms of if they even make it through the pregnancy, limited time. And if you get that time outside of the womb, or if they defy the odds and they live for an extended period of time outside of the womb, you're looking at, significant disability and special needs that will have huge ramifications on your life as a parent, as a caregiver. And so, to just lean into this tension for a second, and any thoughts you'd have for our listeners, bless us with them. Is, if we close our eyes and put ourselves in that place, and that's the news I just got, and that's essentially the assumptions and the worldview that is being spoken over me. Is, hey, either way this ball bounces, it could turn out two of three different ways that this could shake out. What they're not saying, but what they're saying is all of those are undesirable, all of them. And so whether it's having to navigate losing a child, whether it's having a child with disability, hey, nobody really wants that, and nobody really. You have a choice at this point, in our country and with our legal system. You can do away with this and not make this a part of your future. And so, not going, down the abortion road right now in this conversation, I want to give you the chance to just speak to whether it's a medical provider who's finding themselves as the deliverers of that news, whether it's a parent who has received that news, or whether it's somebody who's never been in that situation and may never be in that situation, to unpack. And I think you hit it earlier, and I told you I was going to circle back to it, is just that why would you willingly choose hard? If what you're signing up for, quote unquote, is a hard road and there's a way around it and you have an option to avoid it, why would you take that upon yourself willingly? How would you respond to that notion?
Oh,
That
well,
was, that was a lot.
that's good though, and I love that you're willing to walk into this because it's not easy. And anybody, any family, any mom, any dad that finds themselves in that situation, no condemnation. I totally understand why you don't want to walk towards the thing that feels and looks and seems so unbelievably painful. I don't, cannot dismiss that. I don't dismiss that. And in a small way, I understand. And in many ways, because you have a different life than me, maybe I don't understand. So I just acknowledge that. I'll say this. For me, in everything we've walked through, in all of it, we have tasted pain and we have experienced suffering. I have never regretted knowing Elliot, and I have never regretted knowing Lena. They are two of the greatest things in my life. So to me, I don't want to say it seems easy, but being on this side of things, we don't get to choose. Like, listen, if there was a choice by which you experienced no pain, I would be all for that choice. But the reality is that choice is not in front of us. That is not one of our options. Elliot's life of 99 days is a microcosm of my life. I am going to die. It may be today, it may be when I'm 85, and my kids, if they're so lucky, whoever sits around the five people that come to my funeral, maybe there's a few people sad. Maybe there's not. Maybe by that time I've ticked them all off and run them all off being grumpy. I've been an old man for a long time in my grumpiness, but like, yeah, for me, Elliot's life, you talked earlier about just how kind of clarifying like when you have a child and you're taking care of them and they are your priority and they're not supposed to live long, like it is an oddly clarifying time on These things matter and these things don't. To the point of like, what are we having for dinner? Doesn't matter. It's not up above the threshold of like, I'm actually focused on helping keep my son alive today. It doesn't meet up to that. But some of the clarity for me that I believe I experienced during Elliot's 99 days was just that my life is no different than his life. I mean, we're talking about 99 days or 77 years, but like 77 years might mean I walk through more pain. I'm going to experience more sickness, more pain. And so I think just the idea that we are in control and we can navigate around pain and suffering is just a real facade, and it's a real lie. It's a real deception, to be honest. Like, that is not one of the paths that's in front of us. It is, how do we walk through pain? That's the question. Not do we walk through pain? That, I wish that were the question. I'm choosing the no road on that every time. But that's not the question. It is more of a question of how we walk through pain. So I look at it a little bit completely different because of my faith in Jesus, because of my experiences. But for me, if I'm going to walk through pain, man, I have zero regrets for knowing Elliot. I have zero regrets for knowing Lena. They're two of the greatest gifts in my life, up there on a very short list with Hazel, Anders, and Jenny. Like, these, I love these people just so much. And their lives are such a gift to me that, like, I want to walk down the road where I know them. Like, the path was, do I walk a life of suffering where I don't know them, or do I walk a life of suffering where I know them? I've never regretted knowing them.
That's so good. So we like to just end each episode asking if you have like a favorite go-to verse that's just helped you in like the hardest seasons that you've walked through, that's brought comfort and peace for you, and could be just personally or just for your family as a whole that you guys kind of cling to.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I had like this awesome, unbelievable Christian-y answer. For me, the shortest verse in the Bible is, Jesus cried, and it goes back to just that Lazarus story, which for me, it just exudes this idea that I'm trying to live into, of what we just discussed, right? That there is pain in this life. How am I going to live my life with the reality of pain and suffering? Am I going to pretend like I have control? Well, guess what? Jesus did have control, right? And he grieved it. And he still leaned into it. And so I'm going to pick that verse for today, probably more because we talked about it. And I want people to kind of go back and maybe look at that story. It's a fascinating story. Why is Jesus crying? What in the world? He's God. He's the image of the invisible God, and he's going to raise this guy from the dead. He should have been like, bring me the bubbly, right? Like, dude, we're gonna party here. This is about to get good. I'm about to go viral, right? Like, man, you guys are going to be talking about me for centuries. I'm going to bring this guy back from the dead. It's not every day that I get to even do this, even as God. And Jesus wept. And so to me, that verse just evidences, for me, I'm not supposed to live a life where I don't weep if Jesus wept. And it kind of encapsulates for me a lot of what our conversation's been today.
It's beautiful, bro. My soul is brimming right now. Thank you for your time. Just one more time for everybody else. Matthew Lyle Mooney. You could find them at 99balloons.org. You can find them at he and Jenny at theatypicallife.com. And you better get on over and catch the Atypical podcast. Thanks for your time, bro, and your perspective and your words. You have been for a long time and continue to be a source of encouragement to us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you guys. Love you and proud of you. Love to see what you're up to.
All right, bro. Take care.
This has been the Life Upside Down podcast, powered by Christian Parenting.
Our vision is that every parent and every person might experience hope and joy even in the midst of sorrow. If you found today's content helpful, we'd invite you to pass it along to a friend who might be encouraged as well.
You can find us at christianparenting.org/lifeupsidedown, and we hope you'll continue the journey with us in the weeks to come.
We'd also invite you to check out ablespeaks.org to learn more about the mission we've given our lives to. We'll see you next time.